Now, when did you first decide that you wanted to become a chancellor?
Actually, I never did. I always wanted to be number 2 and work behind a strong leader. And I have worked behind some great leaders. For example, when I was at Texas A&M, the president at that time was Robert Gates, who left there to be Secretary of Defense. So he was my boss. And I've worked for some good leaders. My first job out of graduate school, when I finished at Cornell, was at Xavier University in New Orleans. And Norman Francis is the president there. Norman is the longest running president in the U.S., probably around 47 years.
Wow.
I actually taught his children.
Okay.
And Norman is a great leader. The reason I always wanted to be number 2, Dr. Fenner, was I wanted to have a personal life. Once you become number 1, you become a public figure, and everything you do and everywhere you go, you're in the limelight. And so I thought it was always better to be number 2 because I would have a little personal time in my life. But what happened was a friend of mine, a very close friend and mentor, passed away, and he wanted me to be a college president. And his wife told me that, and I thought the best way to honor him was to do that. And that's why I chose to become a president.
Well, that's a very nice story. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. All right. Let's talk about the state of teachers right now. Of course, teachers are so very important. I'm a principal, you're a chancellor, and of course we need our teachers. I need my teachers in the classrooms, of course, with a smaller classroom size. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. There's a macro issue and there are micro issues. The number one macro issue is just simply teaching is such an underpaid profession. You don't want to say, well, it's because of gender, since most teachers are women. But it does happen that most teachers are women, and it is an underpaid profession. There are very few professions where you become as credentialed as teachers do that men occupy disproportionately. That's underpaid, okay? But we're talking about a group of individuals who are responsible for the primary training of our youth to prepare them to move on into college, into professional school, into career pathways. That's going to impact the economy, say, of North Carolina. If we do a poor job at the K through 12 level, then we're not going to prepare that group for the future. So we invest in them. You know, they really hold the promise for us of making sure that our society is a productive society. Yet, we don't reward them for it. We don't provide the incentive that we should. And we expect that they're going to shoulder the burden like everyone else. I think that's completely unfair. I think in North Carolina, we need to make a decision, we meaning legislators and other individuals who make these kind of decisions. They need to come to grips with the fact that the economic impact of having our best teachers leave the state, the economic impact of not being able to educate students the way we should and that we need to, is going to be tremendous down the road. So I'd like to see as a state that we rally in support of teachers and really stop this nonsense that we're engaged in of continually underpaying them, taking away their tenure, etc.
So how do we come about doing this?
Well, we have to, and this is where people who have political leanings need to get in office, get on school boards, get in positions where they can have that kind of impact. I think what happened was a lot of people just really never thought about it that much, and when individuals gained positions of power at the local level or the state level and started making these decisions, people became more aware. So it's kind of too late now, but sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you really realize the impact of what's going on. So I'm hoping now that more people will run for school boards, more people will begin to write their congressmen and really try to push to change a lot of the things that are happening to teachers.
Chancellor, why do you think that the education field, why is it that teachers are underpaid? I mean, is it that they don't value us, or I mean, why do you think it's that way?
Well, again, I think historically it is a gender issue. I think it's a discipline that's occupied more by women than men. For example, even if you narrowed it down to the teaching of math or computer science, etc., you might find more men in that area. But as a whole, it clearly is a female-dominated area. So I think that's one issue. I think teachers aren't politically empowered necessarily, especially in non-union states. If you're in a non-union state and you're a teacher, you pretty much have little power. So that becomes an issue. I think sometimes what has happened more recently is the tension between private schools and public schools, and and charter schools has now become part of this mix, and all of those have different political alliances, so that confounds this whole scenario, when in fact it's still all about kids. It's all about learning, it's all about good teaching. It doesn't matter what the politics are, public, private, or charter. But I think that has come into the mix and confounded it all. So when you put those factors together, it just puts teachers in a very difficult situation.
Like, for example, a teacher that worked for me at Alger B. Wilkins the other year, she recently told me that she's going to resign, you know, and she's leaving the profession altogether, and that hurt me because I was like, oh my goodness, you know, here's a teacher who always obtained high growth. The kids loved her, we loved her, she did an excellent job. So because of this current situation, you know, she's leaving the profession altogether.
And that's happening a lot. And they're just so discouraged. And it's very difficult to offer them an incentive when they're discouraged. And for most of them, it's not just a financial issue. It's a financial issue, but it's a respect issue, it's an incentive issue, and a lot of teachers have just said enough is enough.
Okay. Well, let's move on to talk about another one of my important and favorite issues, the African American male.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Around the country, it doesn't matter where you look, K through 12, university, community college, you tend to find that the lowest performing group educationally are minority males, especially Black and Latino. And whereas a lot of people bemoan that outcome and that statistic, not a lot of areas are engaging in positive, systematic efforts to change the outcome. When you do find a few good programs, they are thriving. They need financial support often, but they're well thought out programs, they're doing well, etc. So we need to make sure at Fayetteville State, at the community college level here in North Carolina, at the HBCUs, that we produce the kind of programs that become real significant pipelines. For example, if we know that a lot of minority males aren't college ready right now, we need to have summer programs in high school that get them ready to be college ready. Okay? We need to be able to invest in after-school programs. We need to have mentor programs. And I don't mean mentors where they just align with another male or with a woman, but they align with someone who help advance their skills and competencies. I worked at a university once and they wanted me to be part of the minority male program, and I said, fine. Well, the 6 mentees they gave me to mentor, none of them were in my area of psychology. They were in physics or they were in biology and chemistry. And I said, well, I can be a social psychological mentor, but I can't help them with their homework because they're in disciplines that I don't know that much about. So something as simple as that can really make a difference. So we need to invest in these pipeline models that are working well, find the dollars, both state, foundation, or private, because if this group is not successful, again, we'll find that the economic impact in a state, in a city, in a region will be affected by that. We also then send them out into the streets to be educated. You'll find more going to prison, or you just find more who fall out of society and become dropouts.
Okay. Now, what do we need to do to encourage them? I know that the African American male can at times have a lot of anger. Okay, I'm always trying to figure out where does this anger come from, where does this frustration come from, where does this lack of motivation, this lack of intrinsic motivation come from?
Yeah, sometimes they're valid reasons, sometimes they aren't. If you ask, for example, many of these males why they're angry, why they lash out, they'll make a statement about racism or society, but it's a generic statement. When you try to really pin them down and help them identify what the source is, oftentimes they can't identify it. So it's a more generic kind of, I think, emotional response to, they may have problems at home, which get compounded if you have problems at school, which get compounded if you don't have the fundamental skills of being a fairly good speaker or a fairly good writer or communicator. They are dissuaded by things they see on TV and rap videos, etc. So there's a lot of pressure points for them. Sometimes it's unfair for people like me to try to talk very rationally to them because we came up in a different time period. We didn't have all the pressure points as they do now. So we have to be willing to take the time and invest in helping them work through a lot of things. Sometimes they're just things we can't do. We can't change their home situation necessarily. What we can do, though, is make sure that when they're not at home, we're helping them experience a lot of positive feedback. We're helping them grow incrementally And that's something people who are often in their situation aren't going to make quantum leaps in terms of their behavior or quantum leaps in academic achievement. So we have to set up models that are incremental models that help them grow in different areas so they can begin to see their own successes and gain confidence. But you have to stick with them. That's the problem. You have to stick with them. You can't just keep introducing them to a new group of people every year.
Okay. Now, do you think the stereotypes that they have of African American males will ever change?
They'll change slowly. The more successful and the more productive they become, they change. People who want to hold on to stereotypes are going to do it. There's nothing you can do about that group of people. And that's why I don't pay any attention to that group of people. But I think for others who just don't know, who are a little leery, but they really don't have valid reasons to be leery of males of color, I think we can change their attitudes when we start introducing them to a different picture. For example, tomorrow we're hosting the Youth Entrepreneurship Day throughout the city. Young males, especially young males of color between 9 and 12, are going to have stations set up around the city where they're going to sell drinks, tropical punch, water, lemonade, etc. But they've invested a lot in learning how to run a business, learning how to run a stand, pricing napkins and straws in their drinks, making profits. So they've gone through about a 4-month training in doing this. When people see that, and there was a big article in today's paper, when people see that, they begin to form a different impression of young males of color. That, wow, they're productive. They're young entrepreneurs. They can do something positive. And so we have to be as invested in marketing the things we do well with these students as we do producing the outcomes in the students.
Okay. So what impact or what role do you think the Trayvon Martin case has played on our black males and the conversations that we have with them?
Well, unfortunately, the Trayvon Martin case was unfortunate just by the very nature of what happened. But it was even more unfortunate because it allowed the different communication venues that we have in society, far right, far left, shows that are objective like a news show, but other shows which are more slanted talk shows. It gave everybody an open season on not only talking about the issue, but then slanting it towards their own political persuasion. So young males who, for example, were watching these shows might not necessarily be educated in a positive way about the Trayvon Martin case or what the Trayvon Martin case can really mean to them. Because if they didn't get a real positive slant, they'd get one that would probably tend to reinforce what they already thought in a negative way. So it was unfortunate that there were so many modes of communication that in different ways commented on, rightly or wrongly, the case, because it exposed our children to all of those different messages.
Mm-hmm. I know that when I was talking with some of my friends who have African American males, they were expressing to me that they would having conversations about what to do if a policeman approaches you, what to do if you're in a neighborhood and someone approaches you, how not to be so defensive, how not to say a lot, just different things, trying to walk them through how to be.
And that's a good thing to do, and you used the right term, walk them through it. Let them simulate it, let them experience it. Tell them, for example, that you go through the same thing. So I get stopped driving while black. I'm driving a car, doing the speed limit, have a suit on, and somebody stops me, and when you ask them why they stop you, their answer literally is, because I can. Just something as simple as that, because I can, or because I wanted to. Okay? Oh. And so when you let students know that, hey, I'm a professional, I'm a president of a university, and driving while black potentially can happen to me, because it has, probably 6 or 7 times in my life, I think they have a better understanding. But what we want, but then I also follow that up very quickly with, and so here's the positive behaviors I engaged in to try to diffuse that moment.
Okay. So Chancellor, why do you think you were stopped?
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I do have an idea, I just don't want to say on the show.
Okay, well, I understand.
Because I don't want to quote, this is a nice show, I don't want to quote what the officer said, because state trooper said, because it was pretty foul.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a nice show, but it's also a real show.
It's a real show. It's a real show.
Yeah, because I like to talk about. I understand, and that's fine. But I just, like I said, I like to talk about things that, of course, that people need to.
But I will say that of the 6 times, and these are in the last few years, of the 6 times I was stopped, 3 of those times the officer used the N-word.
Wow.
And they were all state troopers. They weren't city off. They were all state troopers.
Of course, and of course they would have have been reported. Okay, so why should people who didn't attend HBCUs support their survival?
Well, let's take the case of FSU. We're a state institution, okay? We have an impact on the city, on the county, on the region. We have an economic impact that's very significant. We produce most of the teachers, most of the principals. We produce a significant number of social workers, psychologists. We have one of the best business programs in the country, top ranked, sending our students on to graduate and professional school, but who come back and work in these areas, etc. So our existence and our success as an institution is vital to the success and existence of the city of Fayetteville or Cumberland County, etc. We need to be supported like everyone else. Like a church needs to be supported by its parishioners, like legislators need to be supported by those who support them. We're responsible for educating students to move into the workplace and be very, very competent. We sometimes can even strike gold when we produce young entrepreneurs who go on to develop patents. Those patents have a significant impact. We have, in our School of Business and Economics, we have entrepreneurial students who have done things in the last couple of years where they've gone on and got patents, and their products have gone to market and been highly successful. Well, that's what we want. I don't think enough people realize that if we didn't exist, Fayetteville would become a very poor city. I've built 5 buildings since I've been here at maybe a cost of about $20 million per building on the average. That means we've employed a lot of people in the city of Fayetteville. Those people might not have been working had we not built these buildings. That's very significant. We're an employer. We're a major employer, right up there with, you know, Fort Bragg is probably first, and Cape Fear, and I'm going to say probably right after that we're third. So even if people didn't gravitate to the mission of an HBCU, just understanding how important Fayetteville State is to the city and the county, etc., as an employer should make people want to support us. But we have a hard time raising money because people have a view of HBCUs as being less than certain white institutions.
And where did that come from?
That's just historical. It's historical. They don't know enough about the HBCUs. They don't do their homework. You do your homework, you find out that we're highly ranked in many areas. In fact, we're ranked more highly than most of the institutions in the UNC system. We're getting ready. In June, the Board of Governors will vote on our PhD program in entrepreneurship. Now, there are no PhD programs in entrepreneurship in North Carolina. Not at Duke, not at Chapel Hill, not at NC State, not at Wake Forest, etc. In fact, there's only 15 in the country. If we get our PhD program in entrepreneurship approved, we're in rarefied air. Nobody has one like it, okay? Yet you'll still have people who want to believe it's less than something. Okay, how could it be less than something when there's only 15 in the country? You know, how can we be less than when our School of Business and Economics is ranked about 65th in the country and 110th in the world? And in fact, only 2 business schools outrank us in North Carolina. That's Chapel Hill and Duke. Okay, none of the other UNC schools do. No other HBCUs do. You tell people these facts and they still don't want to believe them. It's almost as if they can't believe you can be that good. All right, so that's fine. That's fine. We produce students who go out and they're highly successful, etc. So that's the kind of struggle we have in marketing and branding and selling ourselves. Now, it is true that a lot of institutions, not just FSU, but a lot of institutions might historically have had a bad run in an area. You know, our nursing program went through several years where it was the laughingstock of North Carolina. And you know what? It deserved it. It was the laughingstock. But we've changed it now. We're one of the top programs. Our nurses have 100%, you know, pass rate on the nursing board. We have part of our nursing program now has aligned with the Veterans Administration, and several departments have come together to provide family and individual therapy for military who have PTSD. It's in a high demand program. It's one of the best in the state and in the country. Yet we might tell somebody that and they still don't want to believe that we're good. We have a Center for Defense and Homeland Security on campus. Few institutions in the country have a full-blown Center for Defense and Homeland Security where you can get certificates in cybersecurity, cyber intelligence, disaster management, etc. Well, we have one. Nobody else in the UNC system has one. Nobody else in Fayetteville has one. But people still want to believe we're less than. So we have to spend an inordinate amount of time proving ourselves to people.
And how do you do that?
Well, that's why you get into rebranding and remarketing yourself. That's why you constantly present the evidence to people about how good you are. As part of the Capital Campaign, we put together a fantastic booklet on the Capital Campaign, which talks about all our assets and how well we do and how we're top ranked, etc. But there are still people who don't want to believe it. And I don't say anything to people who don't want to donate to the university. I say something to graduates who don't want to donate. That's a different issue. Okay. But there are other people who might not want to donate because they don't have an affiliation, and you know what, that's their business. It's their money and it's their business. But if they put it in a bigger context of what we mean in the city of Fayetteville, in this county, in terms of just economic impact and nothing else. Okay? When we get this PhD program in entrepreneurship, it'll have a national reputation. It'll have an international reputation. We already are being contacted by universities in China and other places about this program. And that will put Fayetteville even more on the map than it is. So there's a halo effect when you do good things. Whether we do it or Fayetteville Tech or Methodist, it doesn't matter. There's a halo effect. It's just that it's discouraging when you hear people talking about something that happened 10 years ago and trying to use it as evidence today. See, people who do that, they have a reason for doing that.
Of course.
They want to continue to hold on to this negative image, to continue to slight the university, etc. But I put our university up against anybody.
Okay. Let's talk about the graduates who don't want to donate, Chancellor.
Yeah, I don't know what their problem is, to be honest, because if you just look at it in pragmatic terms, they're getting paid every 2 weeks or every month with our degree, and they don't even want to turn around and give us $20. And sometimes when you talk to a graduate who hasn't donated for a while, and I'll ask them, you know, why is it you haven't donated? The reasons they offer are just so abstract and unacceptable. For example, one person said to me, well, I remember when I was at FSU and I had this problem in the dorm, and it took the university so long to solve this problem I had with my roommate. My God, everybody has roommate problems that goes to college. Everybody. Is that enough to say I don't want to support the institution even though I get paid on a regular basis with their degree? See, those are people who just are cheap or whatever and don't want to donate. And say that to me. Just say, I don't want to donate, rather than giving me some obtuse explanation that makes absolutely no sense. Okay.
So, of course, I'm assuming that the older alumni, they like to donate. Is that so, Chancellor?
The older alumni like to donate, and you have to approach the older alumni when you ask them to give, recognizing the time period that they were here and recognizing what they valued. You know, sometimes some things that you might want to talk about as being important to you, well, that's not important to them because they were here at a different point in time. And so we try to make sure we do our homework and find out what the different constituent groups that we ask to donate, we try to find out what they value and maybe make sure we have something that speaks to that.
Okay. Do you have plans of more buildings going up in the future?
We need a health and wellness building or a complex because there's nowhere for people to work out on campus.
Okay.
And that's just not acceptable. When students go and their parents go to look at colleges and decide on colleges, on most campuses they visit, there is something equivalent to a health and wellness center or complex. We need to have that on our campus. We also need a new residence hall. 3 of our residence halls in 10 years will be 90 years old. Okay, one of the residence halls we can't even put a sprinkler system in, it's so old. So we had to close it down because it was, you know, clearly a risk. So we need a new residence hall. But I'm not going to build any more new buildings until we winnow down the debt we have from some of the other buildings we built since I've gotten here, because you don't want to get in debt because your bond rating will go down. So hopefully before I leave, we'll get those other 2 done.
Okay. Are you planning on leaving soon?
No, just before I leave.
Oh, okay. All right. I just thought I'd ask. Let's talk about the entrepreneurship and economic development in your community and what we don't need.
Well, we don't need a whole lot of fly-by-night businesses, and let's use Bronco Mall across the street as an example. You know, I'm not happy. I wasn't happy when I got here that Bronco Mall had tattoo parlors, for example, a whole slew of nail salons and other things that really don't have an impact on the community. or don't really pay off for the university. We need to be putting more things in Bronco Mall or more things in our community that have a return on our investment. So we took down the Washington School site, which had sat there unoccupied for 30 years. We finally took it down, and I haven't made any decisions about what we're going to put on that 6 or 7 acres where the Washington High School was. But whatever we put there, it has to be entrepreneurial. Okay, I can't put something there that there's no give back to the university. Okay, that wouldn't be worth it. So we need to think, as we think about the Fayetteville community, especially as we think about the minority aspect of the Fayetteville community or the poorer parts of the Fayetteville community, we need to think about what can we put in these sites that is worthy of them, meets certain societal needs. You know, there's no grocery store now anywhere around here. So you have people in this Murchison Road region that if they don't have a car, they can't get to the grocery store because there is no grocery store. Okay, so what do we need to do to think about meeting their need while at the same time getting some return on investment from the university? So that's what I mean when I say we really need to think about what we don't need just as much as we need to think about what we do need. Okay, we don't need any more nail parlors, you know, because that just is not a return on the investment in our community.
Okay. Now, Chancellor, what can we do? Because we have a lot of poverty. Our homeless rate, of course, is on the rise. What can we do to help, you know, decrease those numbers?
Yeah. Well, if you look at the cities that have had some kind of impact, in those cities, what you often find is that there's been a major collaboration among the city, among the county, among the university, community groups, etc. So just like we're starting now in Fayetteville to have this hard conversation about crime, and when you have a hard conversation about crime, you have to have a hard conversation about drugs, because they're so interwoven, okay? Then it's those collaborative, tough conversations that often lead to solutions. So maybe after we do the crime conversation, we can then do the poverty homeless conversation, because I don't think we are interlocking them as we should.
Okay, all right. Well, Chancellor, I'd like to thank you for being a guest on my show. As always, it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for taking the time to raise the public consciousness by having this show.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, audience, for listening. I'm Dr. Shanessa Fenner, and this is Let's Talk with Dr. Shanessa Fenner.
Got me so very much hypnotized. Familiar stranger, stranger,